Hello, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the BVA State of the Nation report. I'd like to introduce to you Louise Ackelston from BVA, who will give you this presentation. Thank you, Louise.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here today. Just to introduce myself, my name's Louise, and I'm Client Services Manager at BVA BDRC, and I look after the mystery shopping programs that we have in our hospitality customer experience programs. So for those of you who don't know BVA BDRC, we're kind of famously known in the hospitality sector for providing customer experience programs. And BDRC is part of a wider BVA group, a global research consultancy. And our UK office is made up of a number of different teams, which you can see on the screen here. So we've got media, finance, travel and tourism, transport and hotels. And we're really all about giving valuable insights and valuable data to businesses. So some of the data that I'll be speaking about today is taken from Venue Verdict, which is our mystery shopping and post-event feedback programme. So we provide hotels with inquiry handling criteria, which we then benchmark them all against, which allows them to use the mystery shopping tool for their development and for training reasons, and really encourages best practice. And then we collect feedback from event hosts and bookers post-event as well. So that's just to give you a quick overview, because I will be referring to Venue Verdict in a few moments. So moving on to our meetings and events State of the Nation report, which is what I'm here to speak to you about today. I'll be sharing a snippet of the report findings, the areas which really I thought would be most useful for you to know about. And the report will be released this week at some point, so you'll be able to read through the full report. We will share that with you, but there's just a few kind of highlights that I'd like to go through with you today. So firstly, the methodology. We conducted interviews with 22 senior figureheads within the industry. So we had everybody from corporate event planners, agency event planners, tech providers, sector associations, media, PR, all the way through to venues and hoteliers. So we've got some big names there. And secondly, we conducted a quantitative survey via email. And as I mentioned, we will, in the report, we use some data from Venue Verdict, which I just gave you a quick overview of, and then some more reports as well, which you can see there on your screen. And the research was conducted by myself and by Karen Small, who hopefully you're aware of. So this is a list of who we interviewed. So these are the figureheads that provided us with some really valuable insights, and it was so interesting to speak to them. You know, you've got people from Marriott on there, Hilton, we've got Kim from Venues and Events International, we've got Al from 8PR. I mean, conference news, you can see lots of big names on there, and as well as event buyers from some well-known companies as well. So the headlines, what did we learn when we did this piece of research? Firstly, it was really remarkable that actually every business leader in our interview process was so positive, because to be honest, we were expecting it to be quite hard and maybe downbeat. But two words that everybody used was opportunity and change. And obviously, I mean, we acknowledge that some companies unfortunately didn't make it through the pandemic in our sector, but there was an overriding message which came out of the research, and there were three clear areas, and they were business, client or planners, and then people. So just going into a little bit more detail there. So business was all about really refining and repurposing. being flexible, creating partnerships and exploring digital solutions. And then moving to clients, it came out of our research that they seem to really want to learn about products and that their teams focused on employee engagement rather than just events. And they wanted and still seem to want creative solutions. And also stakeholders started really questioning the why when sending employees out to events. And therefore the delegate experience really has to have return on investment now. You know, why should we send you to this event? And then moving to people, yes, we faced the great resignation in the industry and we're still in the industry feeling that pain. But those who stayed wanted to learn, adapt, be employable, and that's created a bit of a power shift really from employer to hospitality professional. And people really seem to look to the government for support, and the lack of support meant that they had to lean on association groups and networks, and therefore these communities are now stronger than they ever were before. So our research showed that all businesses throughout the meetings and events sector had to adapt and quickly to survive. And what's really interesting is that many important components of the industry have been forced to integrate much faster than pre-pandemic. So for example, well-being, digitalization, sustainability, they were all areas which the sector talked about and had done for a few years and really wanted to see change, but it wasn't that much of a priority. So it appears that the force to really change products and services, you know, coupled with actually some time to focus on, you know, repositioning businesses, has forced many areas of importance into an integrated ecosystem, which you can see on the screen here. And yeah, you could argue that, you know, this is for the good because it's, you know, it's brought this to the forefront now. And we've got a quote on the screen there. We're not going back to 2019. It's quite easy, you know, I think for people to think, oh, we'll compare things to 2019, but now, you know, we're moving forward and this is what the industry looks like it's changed to be. So let's have a look at some data. Firstly, UK CAMS, sponsored by Visit Britain with support from venuedirectory.com. They published that in 2020, only 200,000 meetings and events took place in the UK. And that was, you know, versus a very strong past few years, as you can see on the graph there. So, I mean, this confirms what we all know. We know that the number of events taking place was a lot lower, but the 2021 data should be available quite soon as well. So it'll be interesting to see that too, to see what happened last year. So the event planners that we surveyed told us that it's the year of meeting up and that there's huge demand for face-to-face meetings. And these are the results from our quantitative survey that we did. And it gives us kind of early information indication on what business volumes event planners have and what the demands are. So I'd be interested to know your thoughts on this as well. But from the event planners that we surveyed, although it was a relatively small number, they had a healthy number of events that they placed in a normal year, with meetings and conferences being the most frequent. And when we asked them what the expected number was for 2022, compared to 2021, they expected to be booking more conferences and meetings and banqueting and a similar amount of training. So the majority didn't expect less events of any category. And also the survey showed high levels of comfort when booking events for this year. So, you know, there was optimism in being able to book events and those events being able to go ahead. And again, this, it might seem obvious to you, but when put in context after interviewing event buyers, they made it clear that they have money to spend this year, but that they needed suppliers, you know, to be able to help build delegate confidence. So if the supplier can really help event delegates to attend by delivering on all parts of the events ecosystem, then the booker is more likely to convert the business. So you can see here, you know, the average spend is much likely to be higher than it was last year. And budgets for these events are likely to be going up. So, you know, there's much more business to be won and healthy business out there. It's all about, you know, the suppliers that have a huge part to play to kind of, this is a great quote on the screen here, that there's really, you know, a psychological trauma attached to the pandemic with an airborne virus. So it's really about breaking that barrier to get delegates through the door and attending their first event if they haven't already. And then, you know, they realize that actually, this is what I missed. I really miss going to events. In 2020, we consulted with our venue verdict subscribers just to really understand the demands of the meetings and events customer. And it was clear that venues needed to provide confidence for the venues to book. So we therefore added this as a requirement into our inquiry handling criteria for mystery shopping. And you can see just at the top of the screen there, in Q4 2021, only 65% of inquiries placed did the mystery shopper feel that the venue gave them confidence to book their event. So that shows that, you know, there really is some work to be done there from the supplier side. Again, this is looking at some venue verdict data for quoted day delegate rates. And we can see here that the rates quoted increased from 2019 to 2021. The largest increase was actually in Scotland with an increase of 19%. And then the smallest increase was South West and Wales with 0.9%. But in all of the regions, there was an increase shown for the quoted day delegate rates. And the average day delegate rate is actually now the highest on record for the UK overall. And that includes London, North West, South East and Central. And as well as a general recovery in demand, it's likely that there will be supply side factors and cost pressures that are contributing to these increases in day delegate rates. And this data could point to venues being firmer on price because, you know, the margins aren't there, or because, you know, they're prepared to walk away from business if the price isn't right. Or venues might have set lower budgets for meetings and events. There's not so much pressure for them to meet their targets. You know, there's many reasons that this could be. And the 2020 snapshot here is quite interesting because the red line, which is London, that shows a sharp decline in quoted rates in 2020. And the quoted rates seem to be, you know, have bounced back in 2021, and that's going up to the highest ever quoted rates for London. But then when you look at the provinces, which is the yellow line, you can see that actually year on year from 2019 through to 2021, there's been a gradual increase. So it's kind of seems the reverse of what happened in London there. And this next slide is data from our post-event feedback survey, which shows, to be honest, that suppliers really need to be stepping up their customer experience to win business. So we look at the net promoter score, which is the likelihood to recommend in the survey for the post-event for the bookers. And the net promoter score has plummeted from an average of approximately 70 for the end of year 2019 down to 44 in Q1 2021. So the red line shows a similar sharp decline in mystery shopping scores as well, showing that it could be that both the inquiry process and the on-site experience is poorer than it was back in 2019. We did have a pause in testing and feedback in 2020 due to most of the venues being closed and unable to take business. But yeah, it's quite interesting that in 2021, the green line, which is the event planner feedback, so that's, you know, real events that have taken place, feedback from them declined towards the end of the year. And the sales inquiry performance increased slightly, but still, a lot lower than the levels that we were seeing in 2019. And then looking at proposal response times. So on the left, we can see the percentage of proposals sent within 4 and 8 hours in the UK. So this seems to have improved from Q3 2021 to Q4 2021. Again, lower than the levels we were seeing in 2019, but there is an improvement there. Whereas on the right here, we've got the international proposal response times. This is the percentage sending the responses within 4 in the blue line and red in the 8 line, in the 8 in the red line hours. So it kind of looks like the opposite. So for international response times, they seem to be actually, near enough in line with 2019 when we're looking at the Q3 numbers, but then that seems to be gradually decreasing towards the end of last year. So it's just quite interesting to see. So yeah, we hope to see, an improvement back to the levels that we saw in 2019. So just to give you a summary of the emerging components which came out of the reports and, the key findings. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, all of these components were kind of forced to integrate much faster than pre-pandemic. So again, some of them have been in conversation for years in the industry, but it's something that's now been forced to happen a lot quicker. So collaboration, the first one, it seems, everybody wants a government recognised voice and the value of meetings and events and give us, the support that's needed. And then talent, this came up a lot in the conversations that I had with the key panelists that we spoke to. And really, the general consensus was that we all have a responsibility to promote hospitality as being, a great sector to be in. And we need to be offering competitive and thoughtful careers and career paths within the industry as well. Digital shift is an interesting one. So it seems small meetings are being booked online. So Instant Book is actually up 23% at Hubley versus 2019. And, some of the big brands now are building online booking channels for small meetings. So there definitely does seem to be a digital shift there for smaller meetings. And then we've got CX and UX, which is customer experience and user experience. So bookers still need a good customer experience for large events, and small meetings can hit the mark with a good user experience if it is, the digital route that they go down. And then DX, which I don't know if that's the correct term, but delegate experience. So it's all about delegate experience and return on investment for their time, which I mentioned at the beginning again. And then we've got venue and supplier creativity. So suppliers and venues really need to be offering creative and flexible solutions to meet the needs of the delegate experience. And then we've got bleisure, which when we look at delegate return on investment, building in leisure time for events, the need and want for networking and the social side of events. And the idea of clustering events and collaborative travel is something that really came out of the research as well. And then well-being is definitely, top of the agenda. And I think a lot of employers that we spoke to do think that they're putting this first. But we have a survey called ClearSight, which asks, within the survey, asks a question around, well-being and whether you think your employer puts well-being first. And unfortunately, for our industry, it wasn't as positive as you'd hope, but it was a more positive response than in some other sectors. So there's some work to do there, but it's definitely, front of mind. And then finally, sustainability. So, bookers will be choosing sustainable meeting products and venues, And we found, you know, it's coming from the top. So companies will be monitored on things like the carbon footprint and having to report on this. And this will continue. So that's something, you know, that everybody within the industry needs to be really thinking about. And we don't think that's going to be going anywhere either. So yeah, that's, you know, the main summary of the key emerging components from our report. And the full report is being released hopefully today, but definitely by the end of the week, just finalizing some details on there. So that was just to give you a sneak peek of, you know, the overall key findings, and we will share the report with you so that you can read it in detail and look at, you know, any particular sections. There's a lot more detail on the report than there was on the presentation. And we welcome any comments or feedback. We're always happy to talk about meetings and events. So please, you know, don't hesitate to get in touch if you'd like to talk about the report any further. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Louise. That was brilliant, really, really interesting. And I found that when you were talking about mental health, it's something that is very important to EMA. And if you don't mind, I'd like to promote that we have a session tomorrow with Helen from Eventwell talking about attendee wellness returning to live events. So let's proactively fix these problems that your report has found. Like Louise said, we're going to share out the survey to you the report to you at the end of the week in the newsletter, so have a look out for that. But I'd just like to say thank you for your time. That presentation was brilliant. Thanks, Louise.
Thank you so much. Thank you.